Thank you. So like Susan said, technology responding to crisis is our theme for this year. And you'll find as we go through the program that we talk about since the beginning of the pandemic, how we've used technology to care for our employees, to serve our clients, to educate our children and our adults, and how GIS has helped us figure out our current status. But I'm very pleased this morning to announce our first speaker, Randy Mott. Randy Mott was promoted from Senior Vice President to Executive Vice President, Global Information Technology and Chief Information Officer in 2019 in General Motors. He joined GM in 2012, and he's responsible for the company's global IT strategy and all of their IT assets. Prior to GM, Matt served as an Executive VP and CIO of Hewlett-Packard, where he was responsible for all IT. And prior to that, he was a Senior VP and the CIO for Dell. He was responsible for managing the global's IT, and it included the backbone of its extensive internet and web-based capabilities. And prior to Dell, Matt spent 22 years at Walmart, where he held a variety of technical and management positions. And in '94, he was named Senior VP, and CIO. And for the next 6 years, I keep seeing VP and CIO over and over, and it's very impressive. For the next 6 years, Walmart also almost tripled in revenue, and its IT group earned a best-of-class reputation as it cost-effectively leveraged global and common IT systems. And in '96, he was promoted to the Walmart Executive Committee. And in '97, Information Week named him Chief of the Year. Please help me welcome Randy Mott.
Okay, thank you, Kim. So it sounds like I can't hold a job, but it's actually I'm just really old. So, but I've been around IT a lot. Obviously, grew up in Northwest Arkansas, and was fortunate enough to get a job early on with Walmart back in '78. So. And kind of the rest is the history that Kim just went through. So I'm going to talk about just briefly, I'll give you a couple of slides. I promise it's only 2 slides on just GM scale, and then we'll jump into the topic at hand in terms of what we've done from a GM and an IT standpoint as it relates to the crisis that we've all spent this year dealing with. So Matt, yeah, thank you. If you can go to the slides. So let's go to the first slide, please. That's one of the guys working on building ventilators there in Kokomo on the first slide. So, so just the scale. You know, obviously we're across a lot of countries and a lot of time zones. So it wasn't just a U.S. crisis. It's actually been a worldwide crisis for us, as it has for many large companies. We do have obviously a large college recruiting campaign that we've ran since 2013. We've got a number of University of Arkansas graduates, not nearly enough. So if you guys want to send others our way, we're hiring right now. So if you've got nephews or nieces or any family members that are looking for a job in IT, we are looking. I was telling Dr. Douglas at the beginning, we're fortunate in terms of we've got a lot of things happening in the world of EVs and some of our business model changes that it's afforded us the opportunity to actually be in the market and growing when a lot of people are not. So that's actually been a blessing for us. If we go to the next slide, just to give you a little bit of the IT, there's about 7,100 folks that support GMIT. We're all insourced. So we are 99%. We have a few contractors, but we're 99% insourced, if you will. We've done our own private cloud, so we're not using the public clouds in GMIT. We have 2 large data centers in Southeast Michigan that basically support all of our enterprise applications. We do over 600 projects a year in terms of supporting the business. We've been, you know, so obviously it's a large company environment that as we went into the pandemic was certainly a challenge just in terms of the number of employees and how we support them from an IT standpoint. If we go to the next slide, we'll jump into kind of what that looked like for us. And on March 16th, we basically had all GM employees and contractors start working the week of March 16th, start working from home, start working remotely. Now, One of the one of the positives, if you will, of Michigan weather for us is we often had weather days up in Michigan. So we had a large portion of our folks that had to work remotely, often on usually 4 or 5 occasions during the wintertime. So we had a pretty good remote environment that actually we found out actually stood up pretty well in this environment as everybody began to go home on a regular basis. But it was certainly much broader than kind of the normal work from home, even, especially with a lot of our engineers, and we'll talk about that in a second. All of our U.S. manufacturing activity was suspended on March 23rd. This was especially hard, if you will, on GM because the fall before in 2019, we just had the strike with the UAW. So we'd been closed down with the strike. So we were extremely low on inventory with our dealers. We're still low on inventory. We can't get enough trucks, but we're building them as fast as we can. So if somebody on the call wants one, I'm sure one of our dealers will get you one. But so it's been so that was pretty tough. And then we on week of March 27th, shortly after that, we actually made a commitment to build ventilators at our Kokomo, Indiana manufacturing facility. This is a facility where we do a lot of the electronics that go into the vehicle. So it was more of a clean room kind of environment than most of our manufacturing areas. And then we also went into the high gear on manufacturing surgical mask in Warren. So, you know, getting the equipment stood up for both of those. And we'll talk more about both of those in a moment. And so we had a lot of what we termed in terms of with our business partners, reporting to our business partners, what we called above and beyond projects. These were projects that weren't on the list, but were things that we ended up doing over the course of these last several months in support of whether it's our employees or our dealers or our customers around the world to kind of deal with the fact that we were in a very, very different work environment than everybody was used to. So the next slide, Matt. So we had 8 projects that supported our employees, and that included things like when they were coming back to work, temperature scanning. We'll show some of that, touchless printing, so they didn't actually have to touch the printer to, you know, we had badge security printing to go up and actually, you know, print your things at the printer, but we converted that to being able to do that from your phone. Projects supporting our customers in terms of shop, click, drive. Customers, obviously dealerships in a lot of cases were closed during a lot of this. Their sales floors were closed. So enabling them to do more online and then actually just either have their vehicle delivered or pick it up as opposed to coming into the dealership. So a number of projects supporting that. Projects around manufacturing in terms of how we were doing validation on things, material tracking differently, given the state of both suppliers as well as our own plants. In terms of business operations, how we ran even closing the months and the quarters in terms of which we used to be more of a war room effort, but how do you facilitate that in a when nobody's coming to work with our accounting and financial teams. And then of course the supporting the world really with production of ventilators and face masks. And also sharing our workplace safety initiatives through the open source community. We actually put a number of the things out on open source for other companies to use that were potentially in need of the same kinds of things that our teams developed during this time. And then we do safety lock screen. So when your lock screen on your PC coming up to reinforce the safety messages in terms of what the employees needed to be doing as it related to masks, as it related to hand washing and the protocols coming back into the office or back into the plants. And we also had over 100 of our IT employees that went and worked manufacturing shifts in our plant because we had obviously with the COVID-19, we had a lot of absenteeism on the plant, so trying to keep the plants running, and we had employees from all over the company, but it also included some of our IT folks that went and did manufacturing shifts to help keep our Wentzville plant that builds both Chevrolet and GMC midsize trucks, as well as our full-size van program. So it's been it's been not a normal year. And this is all of these things. And the reason we call it above and beyond, because all of them were above and beyond our regular business projects. So we are still on track with all of our business projects that we came into the planning year with in January. We're still at, I think it's 99% on time delivery with our business projects, plus the things here. And obviously with folks being at home, it didn't come without additional time and effort, because with people being at home, a lot of our folks have put in just extra time and effort, even though it was, it's at home and it's hard. It's not as easy in that working environment, especially with a lot of young professionals that we have. But through extra time and effort, the team has been able to stay the course. So the next slide, I'll just break down some of these things in a little more detail quickly. Employee productivity, the next slide, Matt. We had 15,000 designers and engineers that were required to work remotely for the first time. So these were folks that had high-end workstations that use a lot of our high-performance compute, not typically something that they lug home on during the day or on a weekend. So we had to figure out how to make them productive and still be at home as opposed to coming into the office. So we put together a number of options, issuing them laptops to access their workstations basically remotely through their laptop, to then be able to submit a lot of their simulation jobs, et cetera, and still have access to the applications and continue to do their work, but not come into the office. So a lot of our designers and engineers were not used to doing their work on something that was they were able to take home. So we had to make changes to facilitate that. Next slide. The call centers were the same way. So we have a number of call centers throughout the U.S. and actually throughout the some other locations supporting some of our international business. But we had to go into a mode of providing laptops for 5,800 OnStar customer and dealer assistants, call center agents that typically came into a call center environment, and enable those things to work remotely, and train them basically to do that, and do that all in the matter of basically 8 days. So we, over the course of, so we had some working in the office, and as we were making this transition, but then transitioning them all to where 100% of our incoming calls were handled remotely from workers that typically never did their job remotely, if you will. Next slide. And then property removal. Obviously, we had folks taking monitors home, taking, in some cases, desktop PCs home, et cetera. So we put in a solution to try and automate that property pass that was typically not something people had to worry about, and taking keyboards, headsets, things like that home, to do that in an automated fashion, so that we didn't overload the facilities folks in terms of in all of the large office complexes that we have. So tracking for that to make that simple and easy, and facilitate our folks picking up personal items or things they needed for their job to have at the home front. So like I said, monitors, docking stations, et cetera. Next slide. And so remote access for us, we've had a 74% increase in the overall meeting sizes, in terms of that happened remotely. Matt, I think yeah. Oops.
Way.
Oh,
There you go.
Hey, one more back. Number 10, I think, Matt.
One back.
Oh,
That one.
there you go. All right, perfect. Lots of course, audio minutes. You guys are all experiencing and living that, no doubt. Like I said, our VPN, working from home, we had a lot of that, if you will, with just weather conditions in Southeast Michigan that tend to happen to us several times a year. But overall, we had obviously stressed the VPN usage, but a 480% increase. But then also still continued to have, Skype meetings, virtual meetings in terms of instructor virtual training sessions. All of those kind of things still went on. So it was a lot of adaptation by our individual contributors, by our managers, by our senior executives in different business groups to continue to run the business, but do it obviously in a very different way than anyone had experienced for any length of time before. Next slide, Matt. And I mentioned the return to work. So obviously working with the UAW, our manufacturing plant leadership, and our teams is trying to figure out how to get people back into the workplace safely. So self-assessments in terms of having them basically self-assess that they didn't have any of the symptoms. Again, working with the GM medical team as well. They would receive a notification to that they were okay to enter the building. We had to accommodate a number of languages at the same time, but yet protect personal privacy in terms of not having any of this information go anywhere else as it relates to them being able to still have the anonymous things as they come back into the office. Next, one of the things that we did was we have if you think about a plant, and our plants have multiple thousands of people that all of a sudden show up for a shift change. We had to do a number of things on shift changes. We used to do rolling shift changes where you basically, the person coming in from the next shift would basically just step in behind the person that was at that manufacturing station. And then, the other person would then step off the line. Well, obviously we had to have more definitive shift changes so that we didn't have shifts in the building at the same time. But what that meant is as shifts were coming on, we had to do temperature checks of everybody coming in, and which we were doing manually, which took part of the manufacturing team away just to get people in the building away from their normal jobs. But we pretty quickly facilitated that with kiosks that would basically, you'd step up to it. It would recognize whether you had a mask on, would also do a temperature check, and then would give you the green check you see in the picture there. To enter the building makes a very audible sound so that one security personnel in the plant can actually oversee several kiosks that are in motion at the same time, and obviously makes a different sound if there is a temperature problem, for example. So all of that was a way of just trying to get back to a more productive environment as well as a safe environment for our manufacturing teams. And we have those in our offices as well. In fact, the picture one you have a picture of there is at our office there in Austin. So we do that for folks returning to our workplaces as well. Next. And printing safely, I mentioned that at the beginning. So we do badge printing, but that required you to actually be touching the screen in terms of being able to request your print and actually activate it. We changed that to where it's touchless from the standpoint of people don't have to touch the printer. They can do it all on their mobile app. And that's one of the applications that we made available in as open source, and push that out into the open source community as something that if other companies using printers, much like we had, could take that and then modify it for their use. Next slide. And go on to the next one. So we went into, onboarding a lot of new users as it relates to, doing that in a more manual or a less manual way in terms of trying to get people onboarded, as we ended up having a lot of folks, temporary workers, with all of the people that were out and potentially in quarantine, et cetera. We've had a lot more onboarding, especially, like I said, temporary workers that we had to help do that again in a remote way and in a safe way, and continue to drive those kinds of solutions, again, above and beyond, not something that was a problem when folks are able to do those things together, but when you're bringing in a lot of folks in some of our plants to, especially on a temporary basis with all of the absenteeism related to COVID, that was turned into be a bottleneck that we put solutions in place for. And the next slide. Let's go into what we didn't used to produce, but now we produce, mass production. So one of our early concerns in terms of being able to get the workers back in the plant safely was, of course, to have enough masks. So you all remember early on, it seems like a really long time ago, but all of the concerns about having enough masks just to for critical workers, around the country. So we went into gear on actually getting equipment material to produce masks at one of our Warren transmission plant. And the idea was to basically produce enough masks for our workers on a daily basis, but also for have to overproduce so that we could actually supply other critical needs in terms of hospitals and critical care units around the Southeast Michigan area. And in fact, it got much broader than that as we ramped up our production. But the conversion of the plant was less than a week. And the first mask came off the line in March 27th. And we actually shipped those masks out now to all of our facilities. Part of our protocol is when someone comes into a facility, they get a new mask every day. We also mailed masks out to employees at their home for their families to use in terms of when they're out and about in the community as well. And we've done that a couple of times, and we've actually do kids masks as well. So small mask and big mask, if you will. But again, that was part of what we've, we're needing to do if we were going to allow people to come back to work, but do it safely, and then make sure we had enough supply that we could assure all of our employees that they would have the right kind of personal protection equipment. The next one was a little tougher. We worked with a company early on, trying to understand what it would take to ramp up ventilators. And you all were a part of, as we all were, whether we wanted to be or not, the news around concerns over a shortage of ventilators. We worked with a company called Ventec. They were manufacturing about 200 ventilators per month. And obviously there's a lot of parts, there's a lot of complexities in a ventilator. And the other thing, and you may have also heard this in the news, so I won't go into it, but there are different kinds of ventilators. There are simple ventilators, there are complex ventilators, and there are really complex ventilators. So we were actually building the really complex ventilators for hospital use. And so you got into a little bit of a skirmish with our president at over what the cost of these ventilators were, but we were actually doing them just at cost. But there was a lot of difference between us and one of our competitors, and they were doing what might be considered more of an aquarium pump, and we were actually doing hospital grade ventilators. But anyway, but it was a complex deal, a lot of suppliers. We brought in 1,000 manufacturing team members. So these were volunteers because the plants were not working at the time, of course. So we went out to our manufacturing base, asked for volunteers to come to work to work on setting up this ventilator plant. And we went into doing what we do in terms of manufacturing at scale. And so we actually built out over 430 production stations and allowed us to get to a volume of 12,000 per month. So from 200 a month that they were producing at their small facility to a scaled plant of 12,000. GM actually did 30,000 ventilators. That was our contract with the government through with Ventec. And then we actually just turned over this plant facility to Ventec about a month ago. So they now run this facility themselves. But that was a massive ramp up. So as Matt was saying at the beginning, as we were just talking before this meeting started, this was definitely a war type effort for us as it related to some of the above and beyond things happening in the plant, whether mass ventilators or some of the other work that was going on around safety protocols. So I think with that, I think the next one is actually the next thing is actually a short video with our CEO and the head of manufacturing, and as well as the CEO of Ventec that the company produced. So if we can play that, Matt, and then we'll take questions.
It was Mary Barra who actually came to one of our team meetings on the business side. We assured the team really about the sincerity of GM to really do what's right and deliver on our promise.
Once in a lifetime opportunity for us to not only demonstrate what General Motors can do in a fluid situation, but what we can do for the country.
Together, we got on a phone call, and from that moment on, we just went into action. We went into solving problems.
The timeline was really nothing we'd ever done before. The risk associated with it was really nothing we'd ever done before.
We were talking about getting ready for installation of tooling within 2 weeks and full production within 4 weeks of the initial concept.
We didn't have time to go to PO review, issue POs, and order new equipment. We had some repurposed equipment. We've been doing some deployment projects across General Motors.
It was an all hands on deck project where everybody was putting their best foot forward, put their teams in to support these parallel work streams.
We had a functioning secured network up and running within 11 days.
It's an amazing accomplishment. Within 4 weeks, we went from initial design to production of the ventilators. It represented a mammoth amount of coordination amongst multiple groups, working 7 days a week, countless hours, to do something that no one had done before.
It's been an incredible partnership. You literally brought the best of American innovation with the best of American manufacturing.
We had essentially maxed out our ability to use ventilators. I never expected that we would be a recipient of these ventilators. I never did. When we received that phone call, my goodness, I think all of us were just floored.
We don't have to choose which patient is on a ventilator and which patient is not. The benefit of the ventilator will be there for everyone.
We came together as one team. We came together to drive one objective, and we delivered it together.
Okay.
Okay.
So that's,
If you,
that's all I had.
If you will raise your virtual hand, Susan can call on them for any questions that you may have.
Any have questions? That was an amazing effort, Randy. I appreciate that presentation. I had no idea.
It's been an all team effort, and as I said, kind of an above and beyond, and of course the teams were very proud and interested to be involved in and be a part of it. So it was no trouble across the company on all those initiatives, getting people to volunteer to help out. So makes you proud. So
Yes, sir, indeed. Going once, going twice. Any questions for Randy?
Do some on chat.
You have some, yeah, you have some on chat.
Oh,
There's one from John Chamberlain there.
so Randy, John asks, well, he didn't ask, he simply commented, I wish the national effort had been as well organized. But Matt asks, what's the hardest problem that you ran into? And then Elise gives kudos and thanks you very much about American ingenuity. So the hardest problem.
the hardest problem was just getting the supply chain ramped up in the ventilators to do the kind of volume, right? I mean, going from 1,200 a month. I mean, obviously we had to find new suppliers for a lot of the parts because a lot of the suppliers that Ventec had been using weren't able to meet the demand in terms of the volume that we're trying to do. And so finding valid suppliers that we could actually certify in the time frame. And now my new hardest problems is all my business partners want to talk about IT projects and say, we just need to do this in ventilator time. So that's become
you set the bar. That's
become a bit of a challenge for some of my existing IT projects. But
wow. So I see Collins has a couple of questions.
Yeah, Randy, I want to talk about working with people like you now have to do and how that has evolved. Number one, what tools do you guys use? I've had some exposure over the last few months to many different banks and the use of tools. FIS went to Microsoft Teams. In a smaller scale, our group has used Zoom. What do you use? And then what about screen protocol? What do you guys have some requirements to how people behave or how, whether they show their screen or not, you know, that sort of thing in screen protocol and meetings?
Yeah, so that's a good question, Colin. So we've been on Skype the whole time. We're actually transitioning to Teams because of our CEO is very interested in being able to see who she's talking to, and you can't see that many people in Skype. So we've got a limited implementation of Teams, which actually she uses for all of her meetings now and all the senior leaders, and that's being rolled out. So by the first quarter, we'll be moving to Teams. The board has used Zoom for some of their meetings for the very same reason. So we've actually worked with Zoom to have a secure protocol for some of the General Motors board meetings. Early on, we've now used Teams in our last meeting. So but it is trying, you know, for us, it's moving to a more connected and coordinated way with using Teams is what we're going to from a you know, where we'll be on the whole company as we come to the year. But the emphasis is actually around people actually having screens up so you can actually communicate better and see reactions and get the get the full communication as opposed to only the voice. So that's where we've been and where we're headed.
Yeah, that's interesting and good. I believe FIS, which is 50-something thousand employees, does not seem to have a screens on protocol, but we had some banks that would say, well, we're not going to do this unless the screens are on, which I really appreciated. But I know there's bandwidth issues and stuff like that. That's interesting.